So in this presentation, we're going to look at getting some basic input from the game engine and start to talk about some basic interactivity, which will lead us into our gameplay mechanics. As far as creating interactivity in Unity, we have a couple of different options, but they all stem from basic scripting. Now, I'm going to create a simple script to get some feedback from or some input from the game engine. Now, there's really two kinds of input that when it comes to game design, digital game design, we're either getting input from the user or we're getting input from the game engine. And we can kind of combine the results of those inputs or that information to design different results for our game. And so in this case right now, I just have this real simple setup. I have a floor and a cube. When I hit the play button, I'm looking at the cube. So my camera, I haven't moved my camera. This is the default view. I could recompose it a little bit, but I want this cube to rotate. Now, we know how to rotate it and by editing the coordinates. If we select the cube and we go to the inspector, we can modify its transform component and we can specifically change its rotation. We can change its rotation along X. Okay, I'll Command Z to undo that. I can change it along Y, and then of course Z. So whenever we see these three numbers, when we see three numbers strung together, we're usually talking about a basic vector 3, and we're usually talking about that in the order of X, Y, and Z. Okay, so in this case what we're going to do is we're going to create a really simple script to cause this cube to rotate initially along its y-axis. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to my assets folder. I'm going to right click and create a new folder. This new folder is going to be called scripts. Now, we're not going to do a whole lot of scripting, manual scripting in this class, but I just want to demonstrate kind of the basic concept of creating something that gives us a little bit more interactivity from our game. I'll double click on scripts. I'm going to right click and choose to create. I'm going to create a JavaScript. We got a couple of different flavors of scripting that we can build. We can create a C# script, which is a little bit more strict. I'm going to choose the option of JavaScript, which is a little bit more forgiving. That way when I make a mistake or it won't crash my game. So I have a new script here, and I'm just going to call this rotate, capital R-O-T-A-T-E, and hit return. So I now have the basic framework for a JavaScript. In fact, when I select it one time, you can see that it's giving me a little bit of a preview of what is inside this script. Now I want to edit this script, and so I'll just double click on the script. It'll open up my default script editor. In this case, it's mono-develop, which came packaged with Unity when I installed it. And you can see that we have a basic script here. Now we have a function start script, and then we have these little curly brackets that open and close. And I'm just going to highlight that and get rid of that because we don't need the start function. What we want is a function update. And what update is saying is that every time the screen updates, run a little bit of code, any code that we include inside these little curly brackets here. Okay, so I'm just gonna, in my case, I'm going to line 6. I could go just to the right of this curly bracket on line 5, but I'm gonna go to line 6. And I'm gonna type in just a little bit of information here. I'm gonna type in transform, okay, I'm starting lowercase, dot, rotate with a capital R, space, parenthesis, and now I'm going to include 3 values, 0, comma, 0, comma, 0, and then I'm going to close my parenthesis. So what we're saying is we're going to attach this script to an object. And when we do, we're going to find the transform component, and we're going to rotate according to this parameter. X is currently set to 0, Y is currently set to 0, and Z is currently set to 0. So I'm going to change the Y value to 10. I'm going to choose to File, Save, and now I'll either close this window or I'll just jump back into Unity. So I now have a rotate script. Okay, I'm getting a little error here, down here, saying that, oop, I forgot a semicolon at the end. So let me double click, and in fact I did. Okay, I've posted a version of this script inside Blackboard, so you can copy and paste. You can follow along. You can download the script that I've attached. So I forgot a little semicolon, which was enough to kind of break the thing that I was working on. So I'm going to take this rotate script. Here's my preview. Okay, transform.rotate. And I'm going to drag and drop this onto my cube. Now, if I select my cube, you'll notice that I now have a rotate script component. And if I click on the title of rotate, Unity's kind enough to highlight the script and show me which one is attached. Now, when I hit the play button, you can see that my cube is spinning at a rate of 10 degrees per frame update. Now, by frame update, we mean every time this screen is refreshed in our game engine, and if I just go to my stats while I'm playing, I'm running at about 80 frames per second. Okay, so we're rotating 10 degrees, which is really, really fast. Toggle the play button. I'm going to double click on my rotate script, and I'll come back over here and maybe I'll say 1, or I'll slow it down to 0.1 even. Command S to save. I'll go back to Unity and hit the play button to see what kind of results I have. Now that's rotating so slow that I can barely see it, but I do see some progress happening. So I'm just going to jump back in. I'll open up my rotate script and I'll just say change the Y value to 1, and I'll save it and I'll test it again. So I'm just jumping back and forth and changing these values. Now, my computer happens to be running this demo at about 80 frames per second. If you're running this same game that I just created on a laptop, an older laptop, you might be getting a much lower frame rate, and in which case this rotation is going to happen at a different rate because it's tied directly to the frame update, which is not a good practice. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tie this value into real time, or base it on kind of clock seconds rather than frame updates to make it independent of the hardware that we're running it on. So I'm going to jump back into my rotate script, and rather than transform rotate x at 0, y at 1, I'm going to say the y value, I'm going to take 1, I'm going to add a space, and I'm going to multiply this. So I'm going to shift 8 to get an asterisk, space. And what I want to do is I want to multiply this by time, which is capital T, dot delta time. I'm going to save that. I'm going to jump back into Unity, and I'll hit the play button and see what kind of result we get. So now it's rotating, but it's rotating really slow. And the reason it's rotating so slow is that we're no longer rotating per frame update. We're saying rotate 1 degree per second. And time.delta time is a way, multiplying this value to time.delta time is a simple way to get that rotation to talk to seconds instead of frame updates. And so I can bump this up to say 30, so 30 degrees per second. I'll Command S to save. I'll jump back into Unity. I'll hit the play button. While this is playing, I'll select the cube, and I can watch over here, and I can basically just kind of count this off even in my head and see that we're rotating at a rate of about 30 degrees per second. Okay, so that's just a basic overview of how you might do some simple scripting to leverage C# or JavaScript inside the Unity game engine. Now, we're not going to be doing a lot of scripting, as I mentioned. We're going to be developing a lot of logic using some visual programming tools, and our tool of choice is Playmaker. I'm going to introduce Playmaker, and we'll do the same thing we just did, create a rotate of a cube, and we'll kind of compare and contrast the workflow and look at the difference between scripting and visual scripting. But we'll do that in the next presentation.